Medcruise, good morning. Medcruise members, good morning.
Good morning. So I'm very proud of this event because this event is the results of our working our work about a working group of environmental issue, because I'm the director of this working group. So we like a member of Medcruise, we have a big question. So where we would like to know where are we going in the environmental world, in the green world. So today we have some speaker very important. I think that they are the stakeholder of the shipping world, and we have Tom Strang. We know very well Tom. Tom is a chartered naval architect who started his career in British shipbuilder in Barrow, but at the end of the day, we know very well that she's responsible of environmental field of Carnival Corporation. We have Michael Mccarthy. Captain Michael Mccarthy is the current chairman of Cruise Europe. Good morning. Good morning, Michael. We have Walter Selen. Walter joined Espo. He's responsible of environmental commitment of Espo. Good morning, Walter. Good morning. And the last but not least, we have Ivan Hasby. And Ivan Hasby is the head of environmental port of Bergen and director of environmental port index. So good morning, everybody. I want to start from the cruise line, so from Carnival with Tom, and I have some questions. First of all, I want to ask to Tom, which path is Carnival undertaking in the green world, in particular in relation to the reduction of emission?
Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me back to speak to you all. It's always a pleasure to come to Medcruise and to talk to all of you. It's a pity we can't meet in person. I've been asked to keep the answers short because we don't have a massive amount of time and we've got a lot to get through. I could talk for hours on the subject of what is the path of emissions, Valeria, but so clearly at the moment, Carnival has set itself an aspirational target that by 2050, we'll have net zero carbon operations.
Sí, si lo pongo en vista hablante, sí.
So we want to be net zero by 2050. We're part of the Getting to Zero Coalition as well, and we're actively promoting this pathway towards net zero, which means that we need to see zero emission ships hitting the water in the 2030s. We'd also need to see a large percentage of the fuel that's available to the industry being zero emission fuel by 2030. And so we have a long way to go. Clearly, from our perspective, we have a strategy where we're utilizing LNG. And I know you have some follow-up questions on LNG, so I'll wait to
exactly. So the second question was, does the LNG still represent a bridging solution for ports, or it won't be a valid alternative solution in the future? Because you know that we have a lot of ports in Medcruise that have a LNG solution.
No, absolutely. And so LNG is a fuel in transition. It's not a transition fuel. It's a fuel that's in transition in our view. It's a different perspective.
Yeah.
We've started with 4 ships that are operating full time on LNG. Despite the current situation in the LNG market, we're still operating on LNG. We believe it has a significant role to play, and it is a fuel that will allow us to move to a net zero fuel in the future. There's the additional of bio-LNG into that space, which we're seeing more and more opportunity to utilize bio-LNG. And then, of course, there will be synthetic LNG. That doesn't mean we're putting all our eggs in one basket. As you probably are aware, we've made announcements about fuel cell technology. We're looking at methanol-based fuel cells at the moment on our ships. We're also looking at other types of fuel cells using alternative fuels. We've also added batteries. We're adding battery banks to some of our ships to allow us to utilize the power more efficiently. But there is no one-size-fits-all solution in this scenario. So I am afraid it's a very difficult scenario for ports, because the ports would love it if we said this is going to be the fuel of the future. But I don't think for a port that's that's a port that utilizes, or sorry, that has customers that come from many different segments of shipping, it's going to be even more challenging. I think for cruise, we're probably not going to be in the front runners of using ammonia, but we're definitely looking at methanol. We'll continue to use LNG. I doubt very much it's going to be hydrogen directly because of some of the challenges and problems associated with hydrogen. But certainly we're going to see more utilization of methanol and ideally more biofuels in the future. But I don't have any simple answers to that. Carnival, we've peaked our emissions already. We're continuing to invest in new technology. As we bring newer and better ships online, you're going to see more and more of these energy efficiency improvements as we speak.
The last question, obviously, it's necessary to ask you, what do you think about OPS?
So you're probably, I don't know how much you're all aware of the new Fit for 55 package that the European Commission has put on the table. And we don't have the time to go into the details here, but suffice to say, there's a massive challenge being put on ports to provide more OPS, both for cruise ships and container ships in the 2030s. We are a firm believer in Carnival that onshore power supply, shore power, is a good thing. We've been the leading cruise company to implement this. We were the first cruise company to implement it. We've got a higher percentage of our fleet than any other has, but still there's only a handful of ports in Europe. I know Evan is on and others are here and they'll talk more about what they're doing in the future, but we certainly support the use of onshore power. The challenge is, though, that the infrastructure is going to bring and the commitment that's going to be required, not just by the ports, but by their stakeholders, by their national governments, by their local authorities, is going to be massive. And it shouldn't be underestimated. What the Commission has put out there within the FuelEU Maritime, and to be clear, we support the overall objectives of the Green Deal. We all believe that for society, it's the right thing to do. The challenge is how we get there. The amount of investment that's going to be necessary to bring shore power for all of those port calls that we have in Europe and at each berth is going to be very, very significant. And frankly, at the moment, I find it difficult to understand how that's going to be achievable within the timeframes that we're seeing set out. And certainly within the FuelEU Maritime proposal, it's going to be very difficult to see how that onus of responsibility can be placed on the ship owner and not on the supplier.
Exactly.
Because we can only do our part. We've been actively, and as Evan knows, as Michael and others know, we've worked very closely with a lot of ports to ensure that they can get funding, and we're supporting them getting funding. But certainly we're from an industry that's coming back from recovery of the worst 2 years of its life. It's not going to be something that we can spend, we can't fund all of this by ourselves. And particularly if the Commission is looking for container ships and others, you imagine a port like Rotterdam or a port like Antwerp, some of these major hub ports where you've got large infrastructure, yourselves included, many of you on this call here, where you've got large cruise lines infrastructure and container ship infrastructure. It's going to be massively challenging to see how you can have that in place within the timeframes. But yes, we're very positive about shore power. We believe it's a great solution and it helps everybody, and it's a win-win when it's installed correctly.
Thank you, Tom. Your considerations are really very, very interesting and important for Port Authority, because sometimes a lot of Italian president asked to the Port Authority, to the governance, how is possible to have OPS that maybe when in the port arrive 5 or 6 cruises in the same time, right? Civitavecchia in Italy, Barcelona in Spain. So it's not so easy. It's not so easy. Thank you, Tom. Now I'd like to introduce Michael, and that Michael is a chairman of Cruise Europe. First of all, I would like to ask, is the reduction of emission in your ports the results of a green policy made first by the state and then by the Ports Authority? Because you will know very well that the ports of North Europe are working very, very well about environmental issue.
Thank you, Valeria. Yeah, the EU member states and national states comply very much with EU enacted legislation. States that are also signatories to the IMO, in order to enact IMO regulations, they have to transpose those regulations into national law. However, there are many cases where this does not happen, that individual states or ports within the EU comply or enact IMO regulations. And if I give you an example of that, and it's a very unfortunate scenario we have in Northern Europe, where the IMO, as the global regulator of shipping, has been quite specific in relation to emissions, exhaust gas cleaning systems, ballast water, etc. And the IMO came out with a regulation that considered exhaust gas scrubbers as a means of reducing sulfur emissions and ensuring compliance with MARPOL. Many states and many ports within states unilaterally on their own ban exhaust gas scrubber systems. Now, the cruise lines in particular have spent hundreds and hundreds of millions in putting exhaust gas scrubber systems into ships, and yet they don't know from state to state or port to port where they can operate an open loop, or indeed even where they can employ a closed loop. Closed loop is more acceptable, but then you ask yourself the question, what happens with the wash water. You have another example under the Ballast Water Convention, where again, parties and ports and terminals must provide infrastructure to retain and dispose of the sediments removed from ballast water. I would ask your members here today that with large bulk carriers and large container ships, etc., that have thousands and thousands of tons of ballast water, how have they got any facilities, even though IMO and under EU regulations, ports are supposed to have these? So on one hand, you have the cruise industry, and we have to give them huge credit. They are just so far ahead of other sectors of shipping, and they're complying with all of these regulations, and yet they go into ports where national regulations are, maybe enacted or not enacted, and there's a lot of doubt, and there's a lot of inaction by many ports in relation to compliance with IMO regulation.
Thank you. And what do you think about how did environmental sensitivity in your ports start, which began long before then in the ports located in the south of Europe?
Again, look, there's always been environmental awareness in Northern Europe regarding environmental sensitivity, particularly ports that were located in the center of cities. The relationship between ports and cities has become very complex over the last maybe 10, 15, 20 years. There's no doubt that the growing urbanization and the expansion of cities has increased pressure on Portland. Going forward, it's expected that this port-city integration will actually increase rather than decrease. And the port-city relationship will have to be seen in a new perspective. This expansion of people having houses or apartments overlooking harbors and docks and expecting, I suppose, cozy living, they're not mutually compatible with ships' engines, ramps, cranes, tugboats, ship ports working 24/7, because noise, as we know, travels much faster and clearer over water than it does over land. So the associated emissions, and be they dust, noise, excessive light, in fact, are all associated with port activity. It's becoming more and more unacceptable and forcing ports to move out from these urban areas, even though they were there before, and I'm sure many ports make the same. The port was there long before this. So it's a problem, and it has exacerbated the environmental impact or the perceived environmental impact that ships have on communities, even though the ports are absolutely vital to every country and the movement of goods and cargoes, etc.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, do you believe that there is a definitive environmental road for your ports?
There has to be, because the ports have to be compliant. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to operate, and they have to comply with legislation. They have no choice but to embrace the greening of the ports, because we're constantly, every newspaper, every television program, every news report, we're hearing of global warming, climate change, as Tom said, 2050 zero emissions. And by the way, at the London International Shipping Week there weeks ago, they actually announced that the UK is backing zero, as an absolute zero target for shipping emissions by 2050. So you can see that it's on every newspaper, it's everywhere. So ports have absolutely no choice, because sustainable ports will increase their attractiveness. But in order to be successful, they have to be as well as efficient and as well as still operating cost effectively, but they will have to be socially and environmentally acceptable and have operations that are so. So also ports are having to formulate new forms of tourism in the ports that are dealing with the cruise industry and ferries. And we're hearing, I hate the word over tourism and these things, because if you look at, for example, Amsterdam, where 2 to 3% of the tourists come off a cruise ship, yet 97% people fly in. But because they have bed nights, they seem to be more acceptable. But in addition to that, they're not as visible. A ship parked in the middle, berthed in the middle of a city, draws attention, and people say, look at all those people, etc. So that's a perception that many of us have spent years trying to get across, that the cruise industry is a very, very small representation of tourists that are actually in cities.
Yes, okay, thank you, Michael, for your point of view. Okay, I want to start with Walter. I usually, on behalf of MedCruise, I work with Walter in environmental commitment. Thank you for your work. I appreciate the work of Espo, European Seaports. And first of all, I would like to ask you, you are having a direct consultation with all your members. What do you think about this consultation? Because this consultation, we know, I explained that your association is working hard on the possibility of reducing emission in ports, in particular on the revision of European directives, revision of the ambient air quality directives. So we know that there is a consultation. What do you think about this consultation? Is a, you know, is a valid element?
Yeah, thank you, Valeria, for inviting me here today, and thanks to all the other panelists so far for their interventions. And I would be very happy to address your specific question on the ambient air quality directives. But I think before I do that, it's important to sort of situate that ongoing consultation in the larger discussions that are ongoing, of course, on the European level and specifically for the maritime sector. as regards the greening of shipping and the inclusion of maritime into EU climate policy at large. So I think this is a very timely panel discussion that we're having as well, but I would maybe like to change the title somewhat to talk about green solutions for maritime rather than green solutions for ports. After all, the majority of emissions in ports are attributable or connected to in some way to the traffic from the vessels in the port. And from Espo's side, we're very committed to act as a green partner and situating ports in a way as partners and part of a green future for maritime. But what's also important to keep in mind is, of course, that you need the involvement of all the stakeholders in that work to achieve this greening. And I think Tom and Michael both touched on this already in their interventions. And I think it's very interesting to hear their views and some of the concerns that they put forward. And of course, we share some of those concerns. So in terms of what we have been doing already, generally speaking, is that we've been trying to work on putting our best foot forward from the port side, working from the bottom up. We recently published this Espo 2021 Green Guide. It will be the wrong direction for you, but you can see it.
We know very well. We appreciate it.
It's very good. And just to mention in there that in this guide, we actually set out 2 specific targets or goals, ambitions for what we want to do when it comes to air quality and to greening of ports. One is that by 2030, we as port authorities aim to be net zero emitters by greening our own activities and the operations within our own remit. We also, of course, set another ambition as regards shipping companies and our customers in the port area to lower their CO2 emissions and greenhouse gas emissions at berth by at least 50% by 2030. And this sort of should be seen in that larger context and the discussions about Fit for 55, fueling maritime, AFIR, and so on. When it comes to the air quality, the revision of the ambient air quality directives, we're indeed doing a consultation with our members. Because the Commission is looking at basically how they can make this directive more fit for purpose. And we think that this is, of course, a good exercise. We shouldn't necessarily revise the directive for the sake of revising it. We should look at where it could improve. And if so, we need to improve it. From European seaports perspective, air quality is our #1 environmental priority, and it has been so since 2013. We see that ports are already taking quite a lot of action to address air quality. We see a 19% percentage point increase in monitoring of air quality since 2013. We had a 4 percentage point increase compared to last year only in monitoring. So there's clearly, an increased concern or increased importance being placed on this by ports, which perhaps partly could be explained by the point that Michael was making, that we are very much situated in urban areas. 90% of our ports are situated in urban areas, and it's part of our license to operate to address these issues. So when it comes to the specifics of the air quality directive, we think that the monitoring could be further improved upon. And what we need to do there is to make sure that not all the responsibility to do such monitoring should fall on the port authorities. Again, ports are complex entities. They involve a lot of different stakeholders, including, of course, crews and shipping companies. So everyone needs to be on the same page, on board together, in order for this to work. But I think that's the main message we would like to send when it comes to air quality, but also for Fit for 55.
Yeah, maybe you have already answered, but I want to ask you, when it comes to monitoring and control all the states that we have to follow the environmental criteria of the European directives, will this be feasible or difficult to achieve? This is a question that sometimes the Port Authority, think about this situation.
Yes, indeed. I mean, I think we need to be realistic and realize that
exactly,
the European...
realistic, yes, exactly, yeah.
No, but I think we already have quite far-reaching monitoring requirements placed upon ports and other stakeholders under the Air Quality Directive and other relevant legislation as well on the European and international level. The Green Deal and Fit for 55 will surely add additional burden onto all the stakeholders in the maritime sector, including port authorities. What we want to avoid in a way is to have port authorities acting as some sort of green police that's not only supposed to monitor, but also somehow enforce all this legislation, because that is not the traditional traditional role of ports. So I think, of course, you could say that increased monitoring would be good. It would be good to have more data on exactly where emissions are happening, what type of emissions, where they peak, how they develop over time, this type of data. And we're working, discussing a lot with various companies that are actually working together with ports to do such monitoring. For instance, Ericsson has been working with Port of Livorno, I think, to do a pilot study. We've been talking to some French companies as well, working on this. So I mean, action is being taken from the side of the port, both as a response to legislation, but also from the bottom up. But again, the idea is that, of course, ports are there to help and to monitor, but this could also be done, of course, on board the vessel or with the help of local authorities and the shipping companies. I mean, again, whether we like to or not, we will all need to be working in the same direction if we want to deliver on the Fit for 55 Green Deal and also this, a better air quality directive moving forward.
Thank you, Walter. I think that you answer very, very, very clear now, because at the end of the day, it's necessary to work together to make an integrated policy between port authority, between cruises company, with the municipality, and Medcruise is working about to make a protocol between these stakeholders, because it's more easy also for port authority to work in this way. Thank you so much. And we have the last but not least, my colleague Even Asby from Port Authority of Bergen. And I'm very proud to speak about the Port of Bergen. Why? Because the Port of Bergen is an electrical port. So you're welcome in the Port Authority that we are working in progress to become electrical port. So I think that the Port of Bergen is a great example of an electric port for all of us. Could you talk to us from the cruise perspective, or on whether the OPS system works, and with how many ships in the ports? So more or less, you can describe your project. Okay, we are in the panel, so maybe it's a little bit difficult.
No, it's okay.
But anyway,
yeah.
Thank you.
We started this journey actually in 2015, approximately, seeing the same thing as Walter was referring to. Air quality was actually the main driver, which is a condition which occurs now and then at Bergen or in the Bergen city center. But the climate issue is, of course, important, but I think both of those are key points for us then. So in 2015, we got the first shore power connection point for offshore vessels. That's the supply vessels for the oil industry. And today we have actually 21 different connection points for offshore. And the most recent addition to this is 5 connection points for cruise vessels. So around different cruise quays, the ships can now connect, and we have enough energy available for even the biggest cruise ships visiting the port then. The system was actually, for the cruise side, was operational in this year, and there hasn't been many cruise ships around. It's starting now, and actually today we are doing testing on Aida Mar, which is in Tom's set of brands, to see how the system works then. But technically, it seems to be working very well. So I think to offer shore power for cruise is technically fairly easy to do. We have the technology, we have the solutions. We have good experiences regarding doing this for a long time. So that's not the challenge. I guess the main challenge will be, do you have enough energy available in the grid connecting to the city to the port? That's the key point. And according to what I heard from Tom and his people, 2 years ago, you are on the way to convert all of your ships with shore power interfaces. And for Port of Bergen, Carnival represent 50% of the connections. We have 350 calls a year, and if you get 50% of the connections attached to our shore power facility, it's actually also turning out to be a good business case. We are able to carry the costs of the development in a good way. Actually, what's interesting with Port of Bergen is that since we have both low voltage for offshore fleet and for the Hurtigruten smaller passenger ships, it means that we already earn money on offering shore power. That's interesting because it means that you can build a shore power facility for cruise and just keep it there until the market develops, because we are earning money on the other aspects or other assets then. And I think that's a key part when you develop a strategy for shore power in a port, that you look at what are the different ways of utilizing the energy, and then build a business case around this, which is good then. So that's the sort of general picture.
Yeah, thank you. But if you must receive, for example, like a big port like Barcelona, 5 cruises in a day, is it possible to use OPS? Because some port authority have a lot of doubt. For example, in Italy, the Minister of Transportation provides that a lot of millions of euro are directed to the port authority that will be the project of PS ready. So we are working because we have not still ready project about OPS. But the first question is it possible to have OPS when you have a big port with a lot of cruises? This is a big question, because if you are not small but medium ports, transit port, okay, I think it could be possible. But you mean that the port authority, it's necessary to have a global vision of the port. How many cruises arrive in the year? So a global vision.
I think well, first of all, I had a pleasure of talking with the guys in Port of Barcelona doing the shore power development, and they are quite eager to get something similar up and running, and I seem to have the capability. So I think they're an example of a big port able to do this for the cruise market. Then, whether this is a suitable solution for smaller locations for the islands, etc., it can be debated. What we are thinking at Port of Bergen is that shore power is not the only answer to the call,
exactly,
so to say.
Exactly. Yes, I ask you if you think that the electric ports are the definitive solution for the future for your port. You answer now that you are other solution.
I think shore power is a very good solution also. Well, if you have the energy available in the region, but it's coming from a coal-fired plant or whatever, I don't know. It's still a good solution for the port and the city because you remove the air pollution. So that's a key point. But I think we have to look at other solutions in addition, not just choose one horse, but have other options. And I believe the challenge will lie a lot on the ship side to come up with ships which support. Well, they are starting with LNG, which is a huge step forward. I guess 20% reduction in CO2 impact compared with older ships, and a removal of air pollutants, which is really good. And if they are able to move along with other solutions like ammonia or hydrogen, then I think we're on the right track. So you need to look at the whole broad range of solution, and that means that the port needs to develop a strategy for bunkering solutions. What we're doing at Port of Bergen now is that we are looking at bunkering solutions for hydrogen, and this is driven by not only cruise but also other segments. Then But there are cruise companies looking at hydrogen solutions for their ships as well. So this is something we would like to support them.
Thank you. So I want to know from you if there is one solution. No, there is several solutions. Where are we going? I don't know. So I understand that it's not simple to answer, to speak about just only solution for the Port Authority, only green solution. But Tom, you see that, do you think that is it necessary that the cruises company works very closely with the Port Authority?
So it's been interesting listening to the discussion so far. So clearly cruise companies work with the port authorities. We work with the port authorities on many levels. And specifically, if you're talking about OPS, absolutely, because OPS is not something that can be bought. Well, I say traditionally it's not something that gets bought in by ship, although we did have the scenario in Hamburg where we used a portable power supply solution. And so clearly we do work with the ports very closely. And the other thing is we work very closely with the fuel suppliers. Now, if I look at our LNG supply chain in a number of the ports that we visit, there is no LNG infrastructure in that port. That does make the LNG more expensive because of the supply chain challenges, but it is possible to bring those alternative fuels. And LNG, I'm just using LNG as the example of the first of these alternative fuels that's becoming prominent. So clearly you don't need to have the infrastructure for those alternative fuels in every single port, but you need it close by because the cost of the commodity, a significant proportion of that cost is the transportation, is the logistics piece. So, but does it make sense for every single port, even a small port, to build an LNG infrastructure? No, I would argue that it doesn't, because we bring in LNG on bunker barges. What we have to do is ensure that we're not having to have very long supply chains, as we have in one very well-known destination that we visit in the Canary Islands. Our supply chain for LNG is the longest in the world, I believe. Ideally, we'd like to see LNG storage capacity on the islands there. And that would be, because then that could then be transposed to bio-LNG in the future and synthetic LNG after that, and possibly even ammonia in the long term, because a lot of the tank technology that we're seeing today is multi-fuel. So there are opportunities, but clearly it's, we have to work closely with our port partners. And I think it's evidenced by the fact that I've been to a number of your conferences. We've talked with Michael and his team, with all of the port associations, and we have direct links, and because we have direct investments in many of the ports as well, because of our terminal operations. So clearly we do work with those. I think it's also important that the other stakeholders in this, the national authorities, the coast guards, the regulators, are actively involved, because they're the ones who, whoever knows the challenges we had when we first started to talk about LNG supply into Bergen, for example. If you're going to do hydrogen supply, if you're going to do ammonia supply, there's going to be massive challenges there. Not just from the storage perspective, because I think very few cities are going to want to have large ammonia capacity built into their close into their population centers, shall we say. There's going to be challenges with hydrogen and some of these other materials, because they do have very different components to what we're being used to today. So the answer is yes, we have to work very closely with the port community, but we've also got to bring in those other stakeholders, the fuel suppliers, the authorities. Every person needs to be involved in that discussion, because you can't make that decision alone. You as a port, if you're in the port, you can't go and say, I want to do this, without having those people actively involved.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Michael, what do you think about this situation, about the green solution, especially for your port of north of Europe? You think that obviously it's necessary to make an integrated policy between European community, port authority, cruises company. About what do you think about it?
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I mean, we all commend Evan and the Port of Bergen and what they're doing And, I visited the port of Bergen a few years ago, and it's very obvious the reason. I mean, the port of Bergen is almost like inside in a valley. So it's absolutely a fantastic solution from an emissions point of view. I think the debate, certainly in Northern Europe, is about the source of supply. And, in Germany, is it coal supply producing? Yes, and in a lot of other European countries, it's either gas or coal primarily. And, are you transmitting the situation from the port out to where the power station is? And it depends on the power station. Hydroelectric, obviously, in Norway and the west coast of the United States, it makes a lot of sense. I'm involved quite a bit in the offshore renewables sector here in Ireland in relation to offshore floating wind, where they expect to have maybe 3 to 5 gigawatt of wind generated energy by 2030. So that will feed into the timescale that Tom is talking about. The surplus electricity from that will be used to manufacture hydrogen or split hydrogen. So the whole situation is moving towards that, but it's at the speed of it. And I take Tom's part where he said that hydrogen and ammonia, many communities will not want hydrogen or ammonia because of the whole Seveso regulations around the storage of hydrogen. So again, that will have to be outside of cities, outside of populated areas. And again, then you're back to the whole supply chain. So you may end up with core ports where the cruise lines will, bunker, which makes a lot of sense, and take on board bunkers for maybe 10, 12, 14 days, and then, cruise in between. And I was on the Canary Islands looking at the transfer, and I would agree with Tom, it must be the longest supply chain, certainly in the world. But definitely, I think I'm very encouraged because there was an article recently from 150 of the leading players from shipping, chartering, finance, ports, and the fuel interest. And they've come out with a call to action, which they're going to present in November in Glasgow at COP26. And it is basically a call to action for the shipping decarbonization. So it's right across the board. And definitely we're living in challenging times. We're living in exciting times. And I think by 2030, we're in for a hell of a ride of a roller coaster between now and then, with all the innovations and all the changes that are coming down the track.
Thank you, Michael. Very clear. And Walter, what do you think about the situation? Because I think that sometimes we have a European directive very, very clear, but sometimes not. Sometimes the European directive there is no national law in the state that follow immediately the European directive. I speak for Italy, for example. So sometimes we are a little bit difficult now because we sit at the same table. We have one European directive, but we are, that in MedCruise we are a lot of states: Spain, France, Italy, North Africa, Black Sea, and so on. So what do you think? The law could help the port authority?
Of course, I can't speak to the Italian example. I mean, I think it's swings and roundabouts, because I believe you have one of the largest OPS investments commitments from your government out of all of Europe. So that's in a way positive, but it might be true that for individual member states, the transposition and implementation of directives, for instance, Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Directive, might not go as well or as quickly or be implemented in the spirit of the directive. I don't actually know for a fact for individual member states what the situation is. I think with the Commission proposals for regulations, both for alternative fuels infrastructure in ports, but also for requirements to use OPS and reduce greenhouse gas intensity of fuels on board the vessels, that's a clear signal indeed that they want to have more European sort of a level playing field in a way. And I think that level playing field and that investment certainty and regulatory certainty is a crucial precondition for ports, of course, to make investments, but also for all the other stakeholders to get on board. But that is not enough. So I think from our perspective, we expect to see a multi-fuel future, and I believe that's what the Commission is expecting to see as well. And we already touched upon the different characteristics of different shipping segments as well, requiring different solutions. Hydrogen, of course, could be expected to be some sort of a turnkey solution in the sense that you can use hydrogen or derivatives of hydrogen, and you don't necessarily need to only provide it to the maritime side. You could also use it for land side transport in the port area. So that's in a way makes the business case a little bit better. When it comes to LNG, of course, we have requirements already for provision of LNG in core ports core ports in Europe and for OPS by 2025. So we're not there yet. We're still 4 years or 3.5 away from that target. And from our side as ports, we see that around a third of the surveyed ports have some LNG available, mobile or fixed or both. And around a third are planning to install LNG capabilities in the next 2 years. When it comes to OPS, out of the 100 surveyed ports, around 50, so half of them have some sort of OPS capacity. Of course, there's a distinction between low voltage and high voltage. For cruise, high voltage is necessary, and that's a lot more expensive and difficult to install. And there, I think Evan's point about grid capacity and grid availability, and I think Michael touched on that also, is absolutely crucial. We do not want to just shift emissions upstream. We need to look at how we can install OPS where it makes sense, where it is viable from an environmental and a business perspective, and not just have it as a blanket solution. So it needs to be a terminal to terminal, port to port discussion, really, when it comes to OPS. And then I think, again, when we have this regulatory framework in place, and we will need to discuss exactly what that should look like when it comes to Fit for 55, we will have some demand as well, some regulatory alignment between the supply and the demand side. Then you need to get the fuel suppliers indeed as well in line with renewable energy directive. But if we can manage to fit all these puzzle pieces together and collaborate in the sector, we will probably be able to deliver this multi-fuel future. But it won't be easy. So I want to be cautiously optimistic on this point.
Thank you so much, Walter. And even so, do you have some protocol like a port between the port authority and municipality to work together about environmental issue, about environmental world?
The municipality surrounding the cruise port is actually owning 50% of the port together with the surrounding municipalities. So in a way, they are directing us in different ways, and their policy is our policy. Basically, we have always had this problem that somebody is coming from the outside and directing us, telling us what to do. So during the last years, we've actually changed our attitude, and instead of being defensive, saying like Michael was indicating that the port has been there for 100 years, we are trying to identify how can the port play a role as a sort of a green bridge to the ship in the future then. And by taking this active role, we have got a lot of positive cred in the society. Actually, we are then following up on the policy of the municipality in different ways by establishing barriers for the cruise ships. Sorry to say this, Tom. We try to find how we can, in a way, what should I say, balance society and the ship interests. And what we are doing is that we are doing 3 things. We are building infrastructure, which we are doing a lot in different ways. We are also putting up requirements for cruise ships. we are not confirming booking of cruise ships to Port of Bergen unless they have like tier 1 or better at the moment. And it should also be a limit on the number of ships per day and a number of passengers per day. But that's more like a sort of population type of topic. But we also say that if the ship has shore power interface, it gets 6 months earlier, what should I say, admission or opportunity to do a booking at the port. So this has nothing to do with law, but it's just a commercial type of arrangement. And the other thing we are doing is that we have a very strong incentive system based on the polluter pays principle then, which means that those that are not committed to green operation of the ship pay more than those that actually do green operation of the ship then. So if they come with LNG, if they run their scrubber systems in a good way, and if they connect to shore power and etc., they get bonus points and they get a deduction on the final price then. And this is quite a strong incentives, much stronger than what you typically see in other ports around then. And our experience is that it works. A lot of the ships are actually adapting technologies and solutions today, and because there are incentives, this is a better economical deal than not using the system in a good way. That's our general experience then. So this is something we are actually pushing forward, partly on behalf of society locally.
Thank you so much for your reality. I think it's very, very interesting. Well, Emilia, do you know that there is some question from the members?
The floor is open to our members. No question has been sent to the chat function, but anyone would like to ask any question, please, the floor is yours. Now it's your turn, your time.
No question, so we were very clear. I want to ask you to Costanza, for example, or to the Port of Livorno. They worked with me in the working group about the environmental issue. If you have some question, some curiosity about the situation that we are living about the environmental issue.
Yes, thank you very much, Valeria, for this opportunity that you give us. I just want to ask Ivan, he told us about the OPS that is functioning his port, and I don't understand that in the Valeria question that it's possible 5 ships to supply with the OPS, it's possible or not?
Yeah, we have 5 connection points at Port of Bergen, but the way we've set up the system, we have 3 high voltage connections at the same time. It's just that we have a flexibility regarding where to connect. So we can receive 3 ships, and we have a capacity of 45 megawatt, which is sufficient for that purpose.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, and Livorno, for example, because
yes, thank you, Valeria. Good morning, everybody. It's a big pleasure to be to take part to this meeting. I have maybe a general question regarding the relationship with the local communities, because I was looking again the Espo Green Guide, the new one, and it's there is a table, a very interesting table, but we had it in other documents. But each time I like to see the different issues changing during the time, and we see that relationship with the local community appeared in 2009, and it remains at the same, let's say, at the same level. 6th position, 5th position, but not not in the high, not in the three tops level, and that's, well, we can understand because it's a general and a bigger theme that involve all the other ones, no, in a certain way. My question is, do you at the panel do you have particular best practices to in this field to recommend regarding a relationship with the local community? Because in my opinion, but this is more my field, let's say the part in which I'm more involved in my work, this is one of the more delicate points, how a local community can be involved in the right way, which means how they can be involved not only when there is a problem related to pollution or related to air climate, so do you have to recommend something? Do you have experienced something like, I don't know, survey or public debate, especially focused on green and fuels issues? Yes, that's my question.
Thank you, Francesca. Just to interrupt you, because I would like to remember that MedCruise made a questionnaire, a survey, very interesting about LNG, and the results was really very important for all members. Sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Maybe if I can barge in, because you were referring to the Espo Green Guide, and then I'll let the other panelists step in. But I think indeed you captured it quite well. I think a lot of the other top priorities that usually come before port-city relationship and the relationship with the local community. I mean, if you deliver on air quality, if you deliver on waste management, if you manage to address noise pollution, hopefully that's a key plank of your larger work to have a good relationship with the local community. But of course, you're very much right that there's more to be done than just taking a defensive position, as Evan was referring to, that you also need to, in a way, try to make a positive contribution to try and show what the port can do and is doing. And what we try to do in the Green Guide is in a way to make that distinction between mitigating negative externalities and contributing positively to what's to the larger community. And this is really crucial to the license to operate for ports and for all the customers and clients of the port as well. So some examples, I believe it is the port of Bremen and Bremerhaven. I could be wrong, but I believe that they, for instance, launch their environmental report for public consultation each year for everyone, more or less. It's publicly available to give your feedback. That's one way of doing it. Another general suggestion is, of course, that you have sort of port open days, or you have events or areas of the port that are sometimes open for the public, so that it's more an integrated part of the city. Even if that doesn't have to mean that you're sort of building, housing in the port area, but somehow that you use the space for various civic activities. Those would be two recommendations, and there are actually a few more in the Green Guide, so I direct everyone to have a look, and then now I'll cede the floor to everyone.
If I come in there, Valeria, just quickly, I think it's a very good opportunity for many ports, because a lot of regions and every port is different. There's not a one size fits all here, because you can be inside in a city and the cruise ships can be out of sight. Whereas there are many smaller ports where the cruise ship sits right in the middle of the city. It's a very good opportunity for public engagement and for communication. And I'll say it again, communication, and I'll say it again, communication. Because, and particularly now, because during COVID, many ports, regions, and communities and businesses had no revenue from the cruise industry, which is very important to many ports. So now they're coming back. But if we can build it back with a better communication, and the cruise lines are very much open to, visitation limited as it is, but for important people to understand how the cruise industry deals with all the issues like waste emissions and how far ahead they are in relation to all of these. But it's a consultation, so use the opportunity between now and the start of the next big cruise season for your public consultations, your communication with local entities, because they want to welcome the cruise ships back in a safe way. We had it, with COVID, because we had community consultation, and basically people wanted to know where the passengers vaccinated this, and they saw the loss of revenue from the bubble effect of passengers landing and not being able to spend so much money locally and do their own walkabout, etc. So it's very important, but always remember every port is different and each community is different because the effects are different. So it has to be on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah, I can probably comment. I don't have any sort of very good answers to this. It's a sort of general challenge, but we are quite tightly integrated with the political level, which means that we get a very good dialogue this way, and media is always focused on the port, so which makes it also, the discussion goes in a way, and there's a lot of opinion about this. What has been maybe the most beneficial thing we've been doing in recent years was that we did the port didn't know enough about air pollution. So we made an alliance with university researchers and actually established a simulation model for air pollution in the whole city of Bergen. The argument has always been that Tom is coming along with his ships and polluting everything. And the study revealed that that was not the case. He's doing it some days, but a lot of the other days it's other sources. And I think to actually conduct studies to establish knowledge and then convey this to media, bring it into the discussion is important, both because it establishes good facts and also because it establishes your port's role as a voice in this discussion now.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to ask you something to Rui Lopez, because he worked with our working group, and I know that you connected right now, but I think that you have some question about these arguments so important for our port authority, the green solution.
Hello, good morning. It's a pleasure. Welcome you to Madeira. We have a very nice and sunny day. Good morning, Tom. It's great to see you again, every day younger. It's a pleasure to meet everybody, and it's so great to listen to Ivan Husby and see that in Funchal we had conclusions just like they had. When Tom brought us Ida Prima, we had equipment to measure the emissions because we wanted to help Tom to show that LNG reduced the emissions. And the biggest surprise we had is that our peak emissions were when we did not have, and I repeat, we did not have cruise ships. So when people say cruise ships do this, the results showed us different. And in fact, we have to go to new, sorry? We have to go to new equations, and LNG is one piece of the equation. Hydrogen is going to be a piece of equation. Ammonia is going to be a piece of equation. OPS is going to be another piece of the equation. And now maybe we might start thinking, because there are already big players working on that, on a system that sucks the emissions in ports and transform that into fertilizers. We have now new equipments being developed. And when we cannot have OPS, maybe we can have a barge that is with a cap that is placed over the exhaust funnels and transform what comes out of the exhaust into fertilizers. So I'm going already to the next step, and I would like you to bring that there will be, as Michael said, a solution that fits all ports, a solution that fits all ships, but that communication is important, and to be ahead of what we have now, it's the most important for us, ports, and for the industry.
Okay. I think that, Tom, what do you think about Rui Lopez?
Well, we know Rui from before. It's always been an interesting discussion, a challenging discussion at many times because it's a difficult port in some respects from a point of view of the size of vessels we have today. But no, I think these, and there are many initiatives that we're seeing out there today. I recognize time. I think we're getting over time at the moment. So, I'm going to have to leave in a minute, but I think the key, you asked the question before about how we engage with stakeholders and how important it is. Clearly, for cruise lines where we have terminal operations, where they're turnaround operations, we generally have to have a more significant amount of stakeholder engagement, those home ports that we have, or those interporting models, because there the impact is potentially significantly larger with the number of footfall and the change there are. But then there are locations like Dubrovnik and others where there are massive discussions that go on a regular basis between the cruise lines, the port, and the local authorities. It's really important to have an open and frank engagement with your stakeholders. Clearly, we're happy to support those kind of initiatives where we can, because, at the end of the day, if you have a very unhappy, shall we say, local community, for whatever reason, whether it's justified or unjustified, that relationship can very quickly become toxic. And if that happens, then it's bad for everybody. It's bad for business, because then local people do not invest in the infrastructure, in the community. It really can be a very destructive spiral. We've seen that in ports in the past, in locations where, for whatever reason, there's been a story that gets out there, factual or not, in many cases not, that has been very disruptive to the business of the operation of both the port and of the cruise lines, to be quite honest. And at times in the past, we've walked away from ports where it's become untenable. That's the advantage we have as a ship operator. We can walk away at the end of the day, to be very blunt about it. So therefore, it's in all of our interests, though, to keep those relationships open. And I think Michael, Walter, we've done ship open days. We talk about what we're doing. Most of the ports that we work with have regular interactions with their local stakeholders to explain to them what the challenges are. By the same token, we need to know what those issues are. We need to understand what we can do, because very often a very small change to a procedure, whether it's the time of arrival of buses and sitting around on the quaysides, whether it's the location of a piece of equipment, can make a massive change. Even a berth change at times can make a huge difference. So there's lots of opportunities there. I think clearly the environmental agenda is going to be a massive one going forwards. Shipping is facing the biggest challenge it's ever faced in the decarbonization agenda. And we're doing something that is not economic. We're doing something that does not make economic sense going forwards, but it makes societal sense. And as such, it's very, very challenging. But we're up for that challenge. Europe is our heartland, shall we say, because that's where we build our ships. It's where a lot of our ships spend their time operating. We have a massive deployment in the Americas and other areas. But clearly, Europe is leading the way on the green agenda at the moment, and we want to be part of the solution, not part of the problem. And that, I think, should be for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. There are other questions, maybe? Emilia, there is some other question? No?
No.
No, okay.
I just would like to add to what Tom just said.
Please,
the companies did so good on developing the EU LC gateways that we can do the same with the EU decarbonization gateways. Because what we are doing now in ports related to COVID, it was a teamwork. We can do that related to decarbonization.
So this is a question, no? because sometimes it's a little bit long, your question.
No, it's not a question, it's a statement.
It's
That's
a
what I
statement,
believe.
exactly.
That's a statement. Okay,
Exactly,
that's what I
exactly.
believe.
Okay, so okay, I think we finish our time. I want to thank you. I want to thank our speakers who helped us understand our future. So we can conclude that from the important information that we have had, we do not have a single environmental solution, similar for all ports, but we have several solutions. So I think that at the end of the day, I understand that it's very, very important to walk together on the same road, Port Authority, association, cruises company, to understand when we have to stop or when to go straight to the goal. This is very, very, very important. I want to thank you, Michael, Tom, Walter, even for your information, very, very useful for us. And MedCruise is working very, very hard and is work in progress about environmental issue. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Yeah.
Have a good
Thank
day.
you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you very
Bye-bye.
much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you so much. Bye.
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 Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Thanks a lot. See you soon. Ciao.
Thank
Emilia.
you. Thank you.
Good work, Emilia.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rui.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Emilia.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, Amani. Bye.
Hi, how are you, Emilia? Bye. Thank you too
Very
much.
well. Very well. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.